one of my favorite lines from this other episode from season 9 that I really enjoyed is the Frogger episode. All 4 stories. Well, Kramer didn't have too much of a story in this episode. He just had caution tape that he got from a friend. And he was using, of course, he used it to, put tape around certain things he was protecting for himself, or even the fact that he put it around a egg that he dropped on the floor. Jerry had to pick it up, of course, and also to help George with his scheme about getting a Frogger machine to his house without it losing power. And then, of course, he had used up all his tape for nothing, and then he ran out of tape. So, unfortunately, everything fell apart. And also, Jerry was afraid of the Lopper. And Elaine ate a 70-year-old, $29,000 piece of cake. But how did all this come about? It was 4 separate stories that didn't really, for the first time, other than maybe Kramer's. Again, Kramer's story was weak in this episode. But, not saying it was bad, it's just it was a little pointless. But, this is one of the first episodes in a while I could say that we haven't really had all 4 stories coming together, which, again, was Larry David's idea early in the series, which, again, was pretty much the theory starting back in the Busboy episode, if we can remember going back that far, which I can't believe it's been that long since I've done that episode. But anyways, the Frogger. So, the episode starts off, actually, with this scene. It's like a scene that it should have been shown in the whole series, but basically like a typical, just opening scene, just to be funny. Kramer came in while Jerry was going to leave to go out for the day, to go out. He had a set that day, so he's going to be out for pretty much all day. So what is we see? We see sequences of a day in the life of Kramer in Jerry's apartment, just goofing off, moving furniture around, riding the bike, in the apartment. He got into a little bit of a shouting match, I think, with someone outside the window, and they came upstairs banging on the door trying to break in. He even had a big party, and then Jerry comes home late that night, and Kramer sleeps on the couch, and the only thing that was out of place that he didn't have his drink on a coaster, which was just hysterical because he didn't know Kramer did all those things in his apartment while he was gone, just for him to come home and just fix a coaster, which I thought was hilarious. Anyways, though, so Elaine was annoyed about how many cake parties they had at the office. It's either someone's birthday, someone's last day, if someone called in sick, because she called in sick, took a sick day the one day because she was sick of cake parties. They came back and they played a get well soon song for her with a cake, and she just couldn't take it. She was so annoyed with, all the cake that was coming at it. Jerry and George, meanwhile, though, they were getting ready. They're going to be going to Mario's Pizza, their old high school hangout, for one last slice as they found out that they were closing. So they go there and they figured out why they stopped going there, because the guy there was very cold and crabby and whatnot. But while they were there, George realized there was a kid who was actually Drake Bell from Drake and Josh, who was playing the Frogger game. The old game where you try to get the frog across the street and whatnot and all that jazz. It's basically had a lot of different, video game, a lot of different, doctor's offices and other, small little pizza hangouts and whatnot. We all know what the Frogger is. So, of course, George was watching and mentioned how he used to be really into this game. And, of course, when the kid was done and walked away, they looked at the scores that were showing, and the top score, which was 860,630, said GLC. George Louis Costanza. George's high score that he got back in high school still existed. And George just obsessed over this. And of course, so what does he do to go even above and beyond? Well, we'll find out that in a second. And then we get to Jerry's story. So Jerry was, first, Kramer, of course, we don't know how got the caution tape from some friend of his named Doug. Which, of course, George mentions, we hear about these friends, why do we never see them? And it's true, like, most of Kramer's friends, except for, like, Brody or, of course, Newman, is, like, a mystery. Like, we don't really know, or FDR. A few we've seen, but most of Kramer's friends he mentions, we don't see. So, but he got him this caution tape. And then he started telling about some serial killer that was out there they called the Lopper. And the Lopper's latest victim resembled Jerry. Now, how does it tie into Jerry's story? Well, Jerry was dating one of Elaine's friends, Lisi, who won't deny was a beautiful woman. I didn't realize how attractive she was at first. But Jerry goes on a date with her, and he can't stand her. Because she's what you call a sentence finisher. So, of course, Jerry was getting ready to call it a night with her. Instead, he offered to walk her home, though, still, and said, where do you live? And she lives right by Riverside Park. And earlier in the episode, Kramer told them that the Lopper basically hung out in Riverside Park. So Jerry, of course, being dark late at night, it was dark, was afraid of the Lopper. So he turned around instead, took her back to her place, and they slept together that night. And again, all because Jerry was afraid to take her back home because he was afraid of seeing the Lopper at Riverside Park. But that kind of gave Lisi the wrong signal. Because then she plans this big weekend getaway, the Pennsylvania Dutchman exhibit, or whatever the heck it's called. So Jerry realizes that, of course, he doesn't like this girl because she's a sentence finisher, and he realizes he gave her the wrong idea with them sleeping together. So he's got to set things straight with her. But meanwhile, Elaine, even though she has been annoyed with this, with all these cake parties, she still, though, is getting the 4 o'clock sugar rush, as she called it. So, of course, since she'd already, put down the whole idea of having cake for every small occasions, she basically doesn't want to show her face during these, during the cake things, the cake parties. So, when no one was looking, she snuck into Peterman's office and into his fridge. And she pulled out this interesting looking piece of cake and took a bite of it. And then put it back in. And then Peterman came in, of course. And he tells Elaine a little secret. In his fridge is a 70-year-old piece of cake worth $29,000 that he won at an auction that apparently was the same piece of cake from one of King Henry VIII's weddings. So Elaine was wowed by this. Holy smokes, I just ate a piece of antique cake, basically. The problem was every time she would sneak back when she got the 4 o'clock sugar rush, she would take another bite of it, and another, and another. And then, of course, just taking in, the whole, idea of what the cake was, she was just oh my goodness. She was pretend to waltz up, she was actually at the royal wedding. However, the problem was she ate the whole thing. So then, of course, because Peterman, of course, would notice, she went back originally just to fix it, make it look like that a bite wasn't taken out of it. But she ends up eating the whole thing. So then she had to set out to find a replica of that cake so that way Peterman wouldn't notice. We'll get back to that story in a second. Meanwhile, George has this idea. He wants to, he wants the Frogger machine. He doesn't want, with Mario's closing, he wants to buy it. So he buys the Frogger. And he wants to put it at his apartment. And of course, he still play it, but he mainly wants it there just so he has this high score that's the greatest thing he'll ever do in his life. He'll never have a child, he'll never do whatever else he doesn't think he's ever want to do. Jerry points out, though, how are you going to get it there without the power going out? Because if they unplug the game, then all the scores will be reset. To, of course, which George was like, oh my god, no, why is that having a problem? So then he's trying to find people who know how to basically hook up a battery to the machine. That way he doesn't have to unplug it and doesn't lose power. So then Kramer hooks him up with some guys who were not quite, right in the head. I think one was Slippery Pete and some other truck driver. And, of course, they couldn't understand what they were talking about. So they literally had to go to actually Mario's Pizza to lay out the plan of getting the Frogger machine from there to his home and not lose power. Of course, they said, about outlets. And they said, oh, the holes. They didn't call them outlets. They called them holes. So they get that plan all set. But, of course, they need to get a battery, which Slippery Pete was like, can I steal a battery? It's like, George's like, do whatever you want. He goes, just want to get the Frogger to my place. That score meant so much to him. So then Jerry, meanwhile, shows up at Lisey's during the day with a bat, obviously, because he's afraid of the Lopper. And he basically spends 10 hours at her place. And there's like a sequence of them, arguing and doing all this stuff and crying. They're arguing, they're consoling each other, they're happy, they're arguing, like a whole back and forth thing. So it takes them 10 hours to finally break up. And then Jerry's afraid to go home because of the Lopper. Well, he goes outside and he sees someone walking towards him, and he basically knocks on the door and begs for Lisey to buzz it back in, and basically gives in to go on a trip. Of course, the guy he saw far away was Slippery Pete with all the materials he needs to, do the job on the Frogger. So, of course, Jerry goes shopping with their hats and get ready for that trip. We never see Lisey again, of course, after this episode, so, doesn't really matter much anyways. So then, it was the day of the Mario's was closed down, the Frogger machine was outside, it was hooked up to a battery, and George, of course, waiting for the truck driver to show up to drive it to his house. Well, the problem was everybody, Kramer, the truck driver, and Slippery Pete were all playing the game, wearing down the battery to about 3 minutes of power. And with Mario's closed, they needed to find an outlet to plug it in. They're like, outlet? And George goes, holes! I need holes! And of course, there's a pharmacy they're going to try to go in to plug it into. But of course, the problem was, though, was Kramer had to, block off the street with his caution tape. And that's where he ran out of caution tape. So what does George do? He goes, I can do this. And Jerry offers help. He's like, no, I've been waiting for this moment for my entire life. And there's a top of the building point of view shot with the Frogger sound effects of George Costanza with bright colored cars with 10 miles an hour of George trying to get around them to get that Frogger across the street, and they played the Frogger sound effects and everything. It was hilarious. And Jerry and Kramer are just watching, and they're impressed. George, of course, gets it to the other side. However, of course, he had to get it over the hump of the sidewalk, get on the sidewalk for it to get to the pharmacy. And a truck comes. George puts his palm out for it to stop. He notices it won't stop. Dives out of the way for his life. And apparently that was Jason Alexander for real, jumping out of the way of a truck coming at him for real, and lands on a mattress. But that Frogger machine, just like in the video game, boom, gets hit by the truck, bursts into pieces, and of course, one of them landed around Jason Alexander's head, and he had to take cover. And there goes GLC, and Jerry just can't help himself but shake his head from across the street and goes, game over. And indeed it was game over, as the legend of GLC dies. So that's it. Oh wait, no, it's not. I did that on purpose, don't worry. But, so anyways, Elaine, the finish off Elaine's story, because that was the last scene of the episode. Elaine's story finishes off with, she does get a piece of cake to replace it. She thinks looks close to the piece that was in Peterman's fridge. Peterman, though, hires someone to come in and give him an estimate. Basically wants to sell the cake for, like a good, pretty penny. Of course, he pulls out the cake, and the guy says, I say about $219. And then Peterman thinks that he's saying $219,000. And the guy goes, no, $2.19. It's Edmonds. They have their own spot at the end of the row in the super. It was basically the same line that Elaine had said, and Peterman had like a meltdown. And of course, Elaine was in the room, so she started saying, get well soon. Like the Get Well song they would sing whenever they gave cake. And then the episode ends with Elaine being brought into Peterman's office. And basically he was saying what he was sure of what happened with his cake until he remembered the video surveillance camera. And then he showed them the surveillance camera, of course, caught Elaine when she was dancing around, eating the cake. And then Elaine, thinking she's like big time busted, thinks she's gonna lose her job. But Peterman was just like, Elaine, I must ask you, is the item still in you? And basically saying how, basically saying it's not good to eat a 70-year-old piece of cake. As you know, it is antique, but it is not edible. And again, it's meant to be saved and displayed, but again, it's not edible. Basically said, you're about to experience the worst. What you're about to go through is punishment enough. Dismissed. So yeah, Elaine probably got very sick over eating a 70-year-old piece of cake. That's a Frogger. Great episode. Again, with the whole thing with the Lopper and, causing Jerry to get a long weekend out of it with a woman that he can't stand because she's a sentence finisher. Again, Kramer's caution tape was meh. But George and that Frogger. And, of course, that scene they shot from above. Now, of course, also, it was said in the inside look that the lines on the street were white, but in the game, they're yellow. So they had, these pieces of tape they put over the white lines for that overhead shot of Jason Alexander pushing that Frogger machine across the street, acting like the actual Frogger game again, which was just hilarious how it worked. So yeah, fun facts here. So according to the official Twin Galaxies world rankings, George's score of 860,360 would have been ranked at the time number 1 in the world, and as of 2015, it would be ranked number 3. I said before in the shot of George jumping out of the truck. That was Jason Alexander doing his own stunt, and of course a large shard of the machine actually almost hit him in the head and landed on each side of him basically. The Game Buyer magazine, which is the successor to Ultra Game Players magazine, cited this episode as one of the reasons they re-reviewed Frogger, and it gave it a higher score than previously. Again, of course, the sound effects from that whole minute sequence of George trying to get across the street, when the game got hit by the truck was all Frogger sound effects. Again, in the real world, antique cake is sometimes saved, but it is indeed not edible. The original episode was supposed to be the cake. Title of this episode was supposed to be called The Cake Parties, which would not have been the main thing, of course, of this. The exterior shot of Mario's Pizza was of a real Manhattan pizza place named Five Roses Pizza, but it had been closed and then reopened as Iggy's Pizza. The guy who played the truck driver George hired actually also appeared previously on Kramer's Peterman Reality Bus Tour in the Muffin Tops episode. And then there was a story in this that was in a deleted scene, but it was kind of like a prequel was what happened in the next episode, The Maid. It was a deleted scene where Kramer was attracted to a long-distance girlfriend, and the story carried over into the next episode. We'll talk about that when we get to The Maid. And also, George will also mention an ostrich burger in the following episode, The Maid, as he mentioned in this episode as well. And guys, that's the Frogger episode. Again, definitely talked the most I've talked about an episode in a while, for sure. But again, this is definitely one of my favorite episodes in season 9. We got 6 episodes left. Technically only 4 because 2 of them are 2-part episodes. We've got The Maid, the Puerto Rican Day Parade, which is an episode's actually banned from being shown on live TV for reruns. The 2-part clip show called The Chronicle, which we will also incorporate any thoughts from the featurettes on this season called The Last Lap and scenes from the round table. And then, of course, the 2-part finale. That's all we got left, guys. Again, yesterday was 1 year since I started this review. Friday was 1 year since I started this review series. Like I said, when I do finish this and my Harry Potter Let's Play, I'm definitely going to take a breather because although this has been fun, I gotta be real, I've definitely been a little burned out because I've been working on this for a long time and I'm just ready to move on to something different. But, of course, we'll finish up. Next time we see, I have a content day. I'll most likely be uploading the final 6 videos of this Seinfeld review series. It's been a fun ride, guys. We got 1 more disc left. Again, we got The Maid. We've got the Puerto Rican Day Parade. The 2-part clip show called The Chronicle. And the 2-part finale. That's all we got left, guys. So, guys, once again, what's your thoughts on the Frogger episode? Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And do you think you do better than GLC's score of 860,630? Make sure to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure, as always, to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. And until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you guys all later. Have a great rest of your evening. Peace out, everybody.